I feel extremely humble after hearing my fellow experiencers speak today. For those who haven't had contact experience, and this is not a comment to reflect on me, but rather the others, you have no idea of the guts it takes to get up and talk about your contact experience. So I can only applaud the people that have spoken today, Brigitte and Kim and any other experiencer that may be in this room, because I just want to let you know that if you never ever get the opportunity to stand up and speak about your experiences, we're doing it for you. We are up here flying the flag, speaking on behalf of literally millions of contact experiences around this world that will never ever get the opportunity to speak. They will never get the opportunity to share it with their family or with a friend, and they will internalize it, and it will work against them. Let's not be dramatic, let's just say it will work against them. I'd like to say something to begin with that I had no intention of talking about, but after last night's presentation, Mr. Hoagland, I would like to make a comment. I absolutely love being a human being. There were times when I wasn't so keen on it, and at certain times in our history there are events that happen and you cringe looking at the behaviour of other human beings. But I rather like being a human being, and some of the facets of being a human being that I love most is the ability to love. The ability to love and to care. And it's something that, because life is so overwhelming, our ability to love and care gets overwhelmed. But when it rises up in us, just on a day-to-day basis, on the tiny little things of life, when it rises up in us, it is a wonderful thing. And when you see extreme acts of love and kindness, it makes you happy to be a human being. Another thing is our awareness of responsibility. And that's probably quite low in the pecking list, that we like to think that we are responsible in this life, that our words and actions are carried out with responsibility. But once again, life is overwhelming. You know, as John Lennon said, life is what happens to you whilst you're busy making other plans. So we get up in the morning with this intention of how to live our life with care and responsibility, and sometimes we arrive at the end of the day and we think, it didn't quite work out, did it? So I want to talk about, very, very quickly, disclosure. My thoughts on disclosure up until last night were this, that I did not believe that there was going to be disclosure by the powers that be, whoever they may be. It might be Obama, it might be a secret agency, it might be wherever it was going to come from. I did not believe it was going to happen. But based on Richard's talk last night, it's made me feel a bit excited. It's made me think that maybe something is going to happen. Maybe that there is going to be some sort of disclosure, and maybe it's going to be soon. So I've come away with, you know, my belief system a bit shifted, but I'm pretty good at that. I'm pretty good at turning on a sixpence and you know going the complete opposite way if the information is convincing. And you know what Richard presented last night was pretty convincing as far as I was concerned. There was a huge chunk of it we could have done without, but there was a big bit of it that was very worthwhile listening to. And then I got angry. I got angry because the idea of Obama taking on this special project to identify that there was possibly life on this asteroid at some point, and then he is going to come forward in a couple of months' time and say, we have discovered that there was life on this asteroid, and we are giving you this gift of disclosure. Well, fuck him. After 60 years of the modern UFO era, of 1 million photographs, 1 million videos, and 1 million testimonies, when and if this is presented, I hope we chorus together, duh. Disclosure belongs to us. It is our disclosure. The world is changing dramatically, and in the second half of my talk, which won't be in 5 hours' time, in the second half of my talk, I will cover what I think this means. I'm going to talk about my contact experience, because I know lots of people have come to hear what it's all about. But the second half of my talk this evening is what I think it really means and how we should be responding to it. And hopefully, when you leave, you'll be agreeing that, yeah, the contact experiences are okay, but this other stuff, that really resonated in my heart. But the world is changing dramatically, and let me give you an example of how that is changing. Just one tiny little thing. I've just come back from a 4-month book tour of America, and I spoke all over the country, and I spoke at major conferences. I spoke at the Monroe Institute, if anybody knows what that is. I spoke at private gatherings. I spoke at numerous train spotting clubs, better known as MUFON in America, and it was okay. It was okay. After my talks, people would come up and they would give me pieces of the puzzle. Strangely enough, the majority of people that came up and spoke to me were women. Make of that what you will. But, you know, they gave me pieces of the puzzle that I didn't have. So I've slotted them into my overall picture, and I've got a much better view of things. One of the talks I gave, I was invited to speak by Rudy Shield. He is the chief astrophysicist at Harvard. And he said, he's a friend of mine, but he said, I'm going to arrange a talk for you, Steve, when you arrive in Boston. And at that talk, there will be people from Harvard, there will be PhDs, professors, there will be a good representation of the John Mack Institute. So I thought, blimey, this is the night I get shot down in flames. Because some of the stuff that I'm going to come up with later on this evening could come under scrutiny by the scientific community. But 2 years ago, Rudy Shield, although he sort of was on the periphery of this community, he couldn't really embrace it. He was scientist, pure and pure, through and through. He would talk about black holes and things like that, but everything was scientific. This man, and I quote him, Steve, I've had my brain blown open. He is now talking to experiencers who are channeling stuff for him. He talks about his angels. This is the astrophysicist, the chief of it at Harvard University. He's somehow picked up the burning torch that John Mack dropped when he left us. And this is a guy who is now going out talking about black holes, talking about the energy field that connects everything in existence, and he's talking about UFOs and ETs, and it is just absolutely phenomenal. Rudy Shield, have a look at him. He's absolutely brilliant. In the common vernacular of the age, I am an ET contact experiencer. Now, back in the 50s, I would have been known as a contactee. 60s, 70s, 80s, I would have probably been known as an abductee. and more often than not in the tabloids I'm known as a Looney Tunie. I rather like the label of experiencer, because sadly we all have to be labelled in some way so we're identified. I think I'm more of a participator these days, and I'll go on to explain what I mean by that. I will refer to the beings that I am in contact with. I'm going to refer to them as ETs, as extraterrestrials. I believe it's the best and most easily understandable label to give them. It's the term I use when I talk about them wherever, within our community or outside. But I believe we are all ETs. I believe that we are all extraterrestrial. And I wasn't going to include this, but I shall. I believe that the Earth has always been a seeding ground, a nursery for life. I don't know if indigenous life started on this planet and it's still here. I don't know. But what I do know is that this planet is very unique and very, very special. You only have to look in our solar system. We're the only one like this. We are ideally based to promote carbon life. The water, earth, balance on this planet, the weather, the position we are from the sun, everything is perfect. And these planets are few and far between. So a long, long time ago, an extraterrestrial race came to this planet and they planted their seed and they buggered off. There is no surprise that we all look so different. There is no surprise that I look different from a man from Africa, that he looks different from an Eskimo. The Eskimo looks different from an Aboriginal Australian. It is because I believe our point of origin was all extraterrestrial. That different races, when word got out about this planet, extraterrestrial races from all different parts came to this planet and planted their seed. But this time around they stayed to nurture the planting of that seed. So we are like a nursery for life. Just something else I want to touch on, which I had no intention to do, but with Kim's talk this afternoon, something that came up, and then one of her comments worried a member of this audience, and a member of this audience came up to me and said, "Steve, can I ask you about something that Kim just said, because it worries me?" Kim said that during a contact experience there were ETs and human beings. I do not believe that there is any liaison between human beings and ETs, full stop. And remember, this is only my opinion. I'm not here to dictate, educate. All I'm here to do is share. You take it away and you think about it. And the only way you're going to judge my words is with your heart. Will it resonate in your heart, what I'm saying? I don't believe that there is any liaison, any treaty. And so what Kim saw with the aliens and the ETs, I think could possibly be some sort of screen projection that the human beings in her abduction scenario somehow put it into her head. I think the governments and the agencies of this world promote the idea that they are having some sort of liaison with the aliens, because it makes them sound more powerful. It makes them sound that they've got some sort of handle on it, that maybe they know a bit more than us. But with regards to having a treaty with us, how about this? English, European, British, European people went to America, was it 400 years ago? We met the local inhabitants and we created treaties with them. Then what did we do? We shafted them, big style. Now, just on that little particular thing, what about, the British race, Great Britain, The way that we travelled all over the globe, shafting everybody. But we just went in and we said, well, I can see that you've been living here forever. You have your own way of life, your own religion, but what we're going to do is we're going to change all that. Now, do you think the ETs look at our behaviour and think, do you know what would be a good idea if we have some sort of liaison with the government and sign some sort of treaty? Because they're bound to respect it, and that ain't going to happen. Who are the ETs in contact with? Obama? They're not. They're in contact with people in this room. The people that care, the people that love, the people that show responsibility for their words and actions. So how's this going to work tonight? I'm going to talk about my ET contact. I will probably focus on one specific event in quite good detail, and then I'll sort of scan some other experiences. Now, I do that because of time restriction. So what I'll be doing is creating thumbnail sketches of some of my contact experience. The full detail of those experiences can be found in my book, and I go on to explore what I feel the contact means and how we should possibly be responding to it. So, just a sidebar with regards to my book, it isn't just a chronological history of my contact experiences. That's been done. So I was very clear before I started that it had to be different. So sandwiched in between all the contact experiences is my exploration of the impact on me and what it means to us, the human family, on a much grander scale. I also have chapters on human memory, how it works, and where memory is actually stored, because I don't believe it's actually stored in the brain. I explore human and ET intelligence, how the brain works. I explore Earth history, I explore DNA, and I explore human consciousness. That's just a selection of things. A lot of this stuff came from them. And I think one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing, because I have an ability. I have an ability to take complicated information that may contain scientific jargon or complicated theories and stuff like that, and I have the ability to turn it into language that can be understood by everybody, language that we talk to our partners, that we talk across the garden fence, that we talk to at people at work. And that is who my book is written for. You know, I very purposely wrote my book in a style that could be understood by anybody that picked it up. Anybody. So if you pick it up, you may think, well, that bit's a bit simplistic. Yes, that was my intention, because I'm preaching to the choir here, but I want my book to be read by other people, so we don't have to congregate in these tiny groups, that we don't have to put up with the crap that we experience when we bring up our subject matter. So let me touch upon, first of all, before I get on to my real experiences, I'm going to just some tiny little bits. I have had marks that appear on my body, marks that can't be seen with the naked eye. An investigator told me a few years ago, in his investigations, he found that the ETs, when they touch you, leave some sort of residue on your skin that can be seen, but only under UV light, under a black light. So Annie, my wife, and I, we decided, all right, we'll have a go at that. So the first time I had a contact experience after I'd gained this knowledge, Annie gets the light out. And she said, where did they touch you? And I said, well, I remember one of them holding me on the arm. So we get the UV light out, and there's a handprint on my arm. You will hear lots of ET contact experiencers talking about this now because they're using this UV light. It doesn't prove anything. Because I'm not looking to prove anything anyway. It happened. I don't have to prove it. But it helps people, especially experiencers that have an event and think, oh God, am I mad? Am I crazy? Did I dream it? And this little tool helps them to, I don't know, feel a bit better about it. I photograph craft. You know, somebody spoke today about photographing orbs with digital cameras. I've been able to photograph UFOs with a digital camera, and they're not there when I photograph them. I get a sense, I'm told that something is there. I point the camera into a black sky and click, 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 and most of the frames are blank, and then there's a classic craft just appearing on the screen. I've been able to communicate with these craft and ask them to move and stuff like that. And I'm not the only one. You know, you will hear other experiencers speak about this. You can go on YouTube and what's the ranch up in Seti? Seti, thank you. Who? Mount Adams. There's loads of what's his name? James Cameron. Gilliland. James Cameron. That's Titanic. Anyway, Gilliland. Go on his website and you'll see all these videos of lights and craft and everything. And I'm not a big lights in the sky person. Can't stand it. Does my brain in. Who gives that? You know. UFOs exist. There are pilots in them, and those pilots are landing and interacting with us. End of. That's where we start our discussion. We need to stop wasting our time talking about lights in the sky, because it becomes a boys' club, it becomes train spotting. And in these videos from Gilliland, you can hear people watching the craft and saying, stop, and the light stops. Move back, and it moves back. I've had experiences like that. I've had communication downloads, which means that a few years ago, I thought it was migraine. I can never remember that word. There was like this flashing thing in the corner of my eye. And I said to Annie about it. She said, it's migraine. And then this flashing light became a symbol. And then it was another symbol. And then it was a row of symbols tick-tacking across my line of vision. And I asked my contact, what was this? And once again, it's something that others have experienced. Apparently, we're getting some sort of download. I don't know if it's an upgrade for a computer game or what, but and I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is, and I don't know what it is. It's being stored away. I have implants. Or man boobs. No. I have implants that have been put there by the ETs. Now, what these implants are not, they are not tracking devices, as it is speculated. That's what we do. Human beings go out into the jungle and get a tiger and put an implant in so we know where they're going. That's barbaric. The idea that these are tracking devices is ridiculous. What they are there to help me. They are there to monitor my physical and mental health. They are there to release chemicals into my body if I need them. So if I'm unwell or some other situation, I'm being monitored, and that implant will be stimulated to release some chemical, natural chemical within my body to help me. So they're good things. They're not bad things. So these, there's Roger Lear whipping them all out. And in actual fact, he's taking out the good stuff. There are people that have implants that haven't been put there by the ETs. And they have been put there by, we need to decide what term we're going to use here. The powers that be. The weak powers that be. The Wizard of Oz, I think, is a good one, because at some point in the very near future, we are going to open the curtains to find that behind the curtain, this power, this conglomerate of agencies around the world is really a little wizened old man. And they have been telling us that they are all powerful. They have been telling us that they are in charge, and they're not. They tell us that they're in charge, so we believe them. They have fantastic tools at their disposal, the media, for instance, the education system, whatever. But we have been told that they are in charge for millennia, probably, but they are not. And that's going to change. That's all going to change. On one occasion during a contact experience, I was taken into a room on a craft. And in this room, it was quite dimly lit, and there were 2 flat walls, and then at the back there was a wall that appeared to be fish tanks. Fish tanks about that wide and about that deep, stacked up on each other and going across. So there was probably about 18 or 24 of these fish. So the whole wall was fish tanks. And in the tanks was like this, didn't look like water. It had like a blue tinge to it. And floating in each of these tanks was what appeared to be like a little fetus or a little embryo. All different sizes, from like a couple of inches up to probably the size of my fist. No umbilical cord. And these little beings, you know, I've only seen this once, and when I saw it, I was about 16, and I hadn't taken biology that week, so I weren't too sure what it was. But I'd recently seen the film 2001, and at the end of the movie, you see the Star Child floating out in space. And when I saw that film recently, I thought, oh, that's what I saw back then. And I remember distinctly an ET standing next to me. And we both stood there looking at these beings, and she told me that I was a part of those beings, that they were a part of me, and that I should be very proud. Well, as a 16-year-old, I couldn't get a handle on that. It's only now, understanding the bigger picture, that I can appreciate what she was probably saying. But ETs are all different. They are all different. Very, very quickly, I will tell you about the ETs that I have been and still are in contact with. This is my history. From the age of 5 until early adulthood, no, a bit later than that probably, I've been in contact with the Greys. But I've discovered that they're not all the same. In my experience, that is all I can say. In my experience, I can't comment about other people, and I won't do. All I will say is this is how it happened to me. With the Greys, there are 2 types. There are little Greys. They stand about 3.5 feet tall. You all know what they look like, so I won't bother to go into the greater detail. One point I will emphasise is about their eyes. I believe that the big black eyes are eye coverings, that their organic eye is underneath. So these big black eye coverings are like alien Ray-Bans. That they are there to protect their eyes from artificial and natural light when they come into this environment. So when you see videos on YouTube of little aliens popping up outside somebody's window and they blink, it means it's fake, because they don't blink. This isn't their natural eye, and there's not an eyelid. So if you see a if you see a video of an ET with blinking eyes, and you probably know of the video that I'm talking about, it's not real. And these coverings also act as like a magnifier, because these ETs possess an ability, and that ability is to project their intent. They also project their thoughts, their feelings. You will hear experiencers talk about being fearful, and the ET comes up real close and stares at them, and all of a sudden they hear a voice saying, "It's okay, nothing to worry about, be calm." And the voice is within, and they are the ETs are projecting their thoughts, their feelings, their intent, and these black lenses magnify it in some way. When I was, in 2003, my contact changed. Contact began with what I refer to as the light beings. I don't believe that these beings are, as we understand life to be. I believe that they would come from a different dimension, just a different vibrationary plane. You know, we throw these things out, but I don't know if we really understand what we're talking about when we say, "Oh yeah, from a different dimension, that one." Well, I don't know what that means. But all I know is these beings find it very hard to manifest here. So when they do, they appear as light. But I'm very grateful to them, because when they do appear, they appear within the outline of like a bipedal shape. So I can, this simple human can go, "Oh yeah, I can understand." If they appeared as a blob of light, it'd be a different thing. So my contact started with them in 2003 and has continued ever since. What's important about that, I feel, is that that was the big shift in my life. If I have time, I will speak about the particular event, but just suffice to say that when I was returned from that experience, I sobbed my heart out for 3 days, because I didn't want to be here anymore. I wanted to be there. You hear people who have near-death experiences, and they come back and they say, "Oh, wherever I went, it was fantastic, and I can't wait to get back there." And it was the same feeling for me. I've already expressed my love and appreciation for being a human being in my life here. I love my life. I love my wife. I love it. But there I was for 3 days sobbing my heart out, saying to Annie, "I don't want to be here anymore." And I didn't want to die. I just wanted to go back where I'd come from. And a full description of the physical location of where I was taken is all in the book, and it's a whole chapter on its own. But when I was returned, I found that I could no longer eat meat. I could no longer drink alcohol. I could only eat organic food, and I was able to look at food and go, "That's organic, that's not organic," and stuff like that. I found that I had the ability to do hands-on healing. I haven't been able to grow my hair back. Yeah, have you noticed that the greys, no hair? I think it's a sign of evolution. Yeah, well, we didn't ask for your opinion. And then, in 2003, this year, it all changed again. Because in February of this year, somebody made contact with me, and they were, as I use this blanket term of ET, but as I say, I consider us to be ET. I was made contact with human-looking ETs. Human-looking ETs. Now, I believe that these human-looking ETs are very special. I think that we are very, very closely related to them. Very closely related, closer than you might imagine. I believe that they are right under our noses. These little greys, they act with no care. They act with no consideration, no love. They've got no sense of humour. And there's a reason for that. I believe that these little greys are not flesh and blood as we understand it to be. I believe they are a created race. I believe they are something that we are striving to achieve. I believe that they are artificial intelligence, that they are organic robots. I believe that they are Apple Macs on legs. And the reason they appear to have no care is because they're working to a program. They haven't got emotion. It isn't that they don't care. And nothing has ever happened to me during a contact experience that hasn't happened to me in an ER room or in my doctor's surgery. And, you know, when you see film of doctors operating on a patient, you know, it looks like they're chopping up liver, doesn't it? You know, it just looks like there's not that much care involved. Well, these little greys are programmed. They are programmed to take us, to carry out procedures, and to put us back. Anything else is a curved ball. So if you present something to them is out of context, they don't know how to deal with it. And I believe that the human-looking ETs that have now made contact with me are the creators of the greys that I'm in contact with. I believe that they are a created race, and they were created to be an interface between their creators and us, because we might like to think that we are highly advanced spiritual beings, but I think in a lot of ways we are monkeys with computers, and getting up close and personal with us is like getting into a cage with a lion. We are predictably unpredictable. We are very emotional beings. We have a fight and flight reaction to a lot of things. And when cornered, we will hit out. I know of some very evolved human beings that have wanted to kill the greys when they've been in a situation, an abduction situation, because there was a survival instinct. And the ETs know that. So they have to be very careful in their interaction with us. So, 1962, I'm 5 years old, my contact begins. And my very first contact was with what appeared to be, well, I look back now and I would say, yeah, it was a grey. But it wasn't one of the little munchkins. It wasn't one of these little emotionless, programmable, organic robots. It wasn't. She looked similar. Although she stood about 4 feet tall, and she had the disproportionate head and limbs and the big black eyes, but there was a soul, there was a spirit inside. And why I know that there was a spirit inside, because since that time, and she is still in my life, and I say she is a female. She has shown me love and care, consideration, nurture. She is my teacher. She's been everything. And whenever I've had a contact experience, if I haven't been able to see her, I know she's been there. And when I first encountered this being, I thought she was beautiful. This little 5-year-old boy thought she was beautiful. And I called her the witch. And why I called her the witch, I'm really not sure. Really not sure, because she didn't look like a witch, and I didn't think she was witchy poo or anything horrible. But what's interesting, when I give a talk, I have had people come up to me, women again, people that come up to me and say, do you know what, Steve, you're never going to believe this. And if I had £1 for every time I've heard that in the last 6 months, I'd be a rich man. They say, you're never going to believe this, but my first contact was with a being that I call the witch. So are they giving us that name to call them? I don't know. Are they saying, just using it as a term, so when experiencers meet each other and say, my ET was called the witch, we know the truth in it. Around about that time, probably when I was about 6 or 7, before I started school, my parents used to go to work, and I was looked after by a great aunt. We lived in central London. She used to take me on picnics to a place called Clapham Common. It was an area of grassland and trees, and it used to be a regular thing. We used to take me up there. Now, when we used to, after we'd had our picnics, I used to wander off, which, when you think about it, is a bit strange. 6 and 7-year-old. I know, Brigitte was saying earlier on that life was different back in the dark ages, that, kids could roam the street and things and that. But this great aunt would allow me to wander off into the forest on my own. I suggest that it was third-party play, that there was some influence that allowed her to do that, to allow me to have an experience. I used to go to the same little coppice of trees. I used to walk into this coppice of trees, and there used to be a big open area, and in that open area was a building. I called it a building because that's all I knew that it was. I was 6, 7 years of age, and this is my world. This is the most exotic thing in my world at that time was Batman on the TV, I guess. So I saw it as a building. In actual fact, I called it a hospital. And the reason I called it a hospital, because of what I saw when I went in this building. Let me just tell you what this building looked like. And I'll cut to the chase. It looked like a flying saucer. It was a round building. It had windows round it. It was silver. It was domed in. It was on 3 legs. But this was a building to me. I used to go in there, and the reason I thought it was a hospital, because I used to encounter sickly-looking children inside. These sickly-looking children looked very similar to the children that Kim described. Sparse hair. And they were little, they had little white gowns on. They didn't look well. So I thought I was in a hospital. Later on, I saw photographs or film of children who had cancer. They'd had chemotherapy. That's what they looked like, these little children that I encountered. And I used to play with them. That was my job. I knew I was there to play and interact with these children. I loved it because I was in charge. I was the boss. And I could boss all these kids around. And I used to teach them how to do Ring a Ring of Roses. But I knew then that these kids weren't too bright, that they were a bit slow on the uptake. So when I said Ring a Ring of Roses, all fall down, and I used to plonk down, it would be like a couple of seconds before they would drop. And this went on for quite a while. I don't remember verbal talk. There were no of the greys, ETs there. There was just this little group of children. Now, what was all that about? Why was I there? What was I doing? It stopped. But I remember those little children with love in my heart. Let's jump forward now to 1973. I am 16 years of age. I looked like a Native American Indian. I had hair down to here. I weighed about 90 pounds soaking wet. And, I was the man about town. I was starting to venture out into the big world, girlfriends and beer. 16. And I had the cheek to criticise my son when he did it. But that's what we do, don't we? So let me paint this picture of this particular experience. 1973, I'm in the suburbs of London. It is January the 17th, and it is freezing cold. A group of boys have congregated in a flat in the suburbs. The parents of the boy who lives there have gone away for the weekend. So this one particular boy, John, his name, has invited 5 of his friends round to come to his house one Saturday evening. The intention of the gathering was for the 6 boys to worship the God that was David Bowie. That Saturday night, he was going to be on the Russell Harty show. Who remembers Russell? He was great. He was on the Russell Harty show. He was going to play his new song, Driving Saturday, and we were all going to be there and we were going to worship because, we were all little David Bowie-ites. I had all my red spiky hair and my big earring and stuff. I look gorgeous, really. No, really. So we had a few beers. We got some pizza in. Now, I couldn't drink beer that night because I just had my appendix out. I was on antibiotics, so I didn't have beer. My other friends, there was Paul and Jimmy. They were brothers. And there was Duncan and Mac. Now, although I didn't have any beer, my friend Paul was very courageous that night because he drank my share of the beer as well, which was, you know, really, that's what mates are for. So by the end of the evening, he was really quite drunk because, you know, at 15, 16, you know, you only need a snifter and you're all over the place. So at the end of the night, his brother Jimmy orders a cab, they pile in and they drive 3.5 miles across town in this freezing cold weather and they go home. Duncan and Mac do so. They live locally. Me, I live miles away. I live in, you know, central London. So John had already arranged for me to stay the night. So I went to bed. There was his sister that was away for the weekend. I used her room. So I went into bed. There was a big window. I took all my kit off, jumped into bed, and there was no curtains because we were high up in a little apartment block. And as I was looking at this big starry sky and I fell asleep. And then I woke up the next morning, not in that room. There was no big window. There was no Donny Osmond poster on the wall that had been there the night before. I wasn't in a bed tucked in the corner as I had been. This room was there was no external light except for a little crack of light coming in from the side that I could see. Around me were boxes. There was a ladder. There were some DIY tools on the wall. And then there's a little staircase. I'm in a basement. So I get out of bed and I think, you know, there's the little voice that explains everything, that rationalises. And the little voice said, don't worry about it. Everything's cool. You had a drink last night. It reacted with the antibiotics and you went sleepwalking. And you're in the basement. And then there's the other voice that says, John's apartment was all on one floor. And this one went, shut up. So I looked round for my clothes because, remember, I'm naked. My clothes aren't there. I'd taken them off, folded them up and put them on the end of the bed. They're not there. I take the bed cover and wrap it round me. I go up this staircase, push open the door, and there's a kitchen. In this kitchen is a woman. I think, geez, John's mum has come home early. I wonder if she knows who I am. So I announce myself. I say, good morning. So she turns round, and the first thing she does is scream. Because here in this kitchen is a semi-naked, 19-year-old, long-haired person. So obviously she doesn't know who I am. So she starts screaming and shouting at me. So I had to wait until she caught a breath. And when she caught a breath, I said, I'm John's friend. And she said, who's John? And then I noticed at my side were two people. And it was Paul and Jimmy. My drunken friend Paul and his brother Jimmy. And they started shouting at me as the mother left the room. And the mother left the room saying, next time you have a friend to stay, Paul, you tell me. So Paul and Jimmy start shouting at me now. Eventually they take a breath and I say, hold on, wait. Because now I'm getting a little bit scared at my predicament. And I say, hold on guys, let's get it clear what you're accusing me of. You're accusing me of, when you two left last night in the cab, I followed you 3.5 miles across town in the freezing cold, stark naked. That I found your home, although I've never been here before. I dismantled the alarm system, broke into the house, snuck down into the basement and went to sleep. That's what you are saying I did. And they just both went. Because, you know, when you have an argument, when there's some sort of discussion, there's always doors to get out of. But every time each one of us tried to go through a door, the door slammed. Because there was nowhere to go. There was absolutely... I've never been in that situation ever again. Whenever I've been in an argument with my wife, there's always an escape route. But that morning, there wasn't. There was nowhere to go. There was absolutely no explanation. They phoned John, and John said, Steve's not here, but his clothes are. So he brought my clothes over, and we all sat down and we all looked at each other, and that's all we did. We just stared at each other because there was no way of explaining what had happened. We never talked about it again. Because at that moment, at that precise moment in time, I had no explanation. With my contact has been conscious, but not necessarily straight away. Sometimes my contact experience over the last 10 years has been completely conscious from beginning to end. But prior to that, there's been occasions where it's completely conscious, and then there's been other occasions where something has happened, but I don't remember until the next day or a week later. And at that moment in time, I didn't remember what had happened. I thought it would have been kept a secret amongst the four of us, but somehow it leaked out to our extended friends because I became known as the 3-mile streaker. But I remembered what happened. I remembered. I was lying in bed, watching the stars. One of them started moving. I knew I was a contact experiencer. I'd known since I was 5 years old. However, from the age of 5 to the age of 12, I was totally cool about my contact. I embraced it. I loved it. It was like playing soccer with my friends. It was like watching Batman on the TV. It was great. Just another part of my life. And then when I was 12, something very, very normal, sadly very normal, happened. My mother left the family home. And when she left, she took my trust of the world with her. So I stopped trusting the world I lived in. And because my ET contact was such an important part of my life, my perception of my contact changed. My contact didn't change, only my perception. So from 12 until adulthood, I no longer embraced it. So when I lay in bed that night and watched this light moving, I knew what was going to play out, but I didn't want it to happen. I found I was a bit scared. I just didn't want it to happen. Anyway, this light played around in the sky and eventually just moved straight towards the window and then stopped, and it illuminated the whole room. I've now got my eyes closed because I know definitely where this is going, and there's this keep your eyes closed and nothing will happen thing going on for me. And then I had this overwhelming urge to open my eyes, and when I did, there was a grey here. And when I worked with Bud Hopkins a few years ago, and he regressed me on this particular experience, I screamed and virtually leapt up on the back of the couch in his apartment because I woke up and there was this grey face right next to me. And I knew what it was and I knew what was going to happen, but that's how I reacted. They got me out of bed and they walked me towards the window. And something happened for the very first time that night. They took me through a solid object. As there was one in front of me and one on either side, and they walked me towards the window, and I'm thinking, open the window, open the window, open the window, and then I'm walking through it. If you get like a silk scarf or something and just pull it across your face, that's one of the sensations it feels like when you go through this solid object. It also churns your stomach up and makes you want to vomit. There's no comparison. And I remember the moment I went through that window so vividly, because remember I was stark naked, and it was January the 17th and it was freezing cold. And there I was, hanging in the air, 3 stories up, surrounded by little ETs and a huge big flying craft above my head. And whenever I leave a warm environment and go out into freezing cold weather, I'm taken back to that moment in a flash. And up until that moment, it was surreal. And then the cold blast hit you. And it woke me up in a million ways. I was taken on board the craft. I went through several procedures. And I believe it was on that night that a sperm sample was taken from me. And I suppose I'm contradicting myself when I say nothing ever happens to me that hasn't happened in an ER room or the doctor's surgery. Well, you don't know the relationship I have with my doctor. So I believe they took it. Anyway, they took me out of the room, took me into like a little corridor, very dark corridor. And because of the procedures I'd just gone through, my head was spinning. I didn't know what day it was. And they put me on a bench, and this bench was like a lip that stuck out from the wall. Too low for me to sit on, obviously designed for somebody much smaller to sit on. So I sat on this lip, and I just sat there in a daze until time passed, and then I was aware of a presence in the corridor, and I looked, and there were 3 silhouettes on the bend of the corridor. 2 silhouettes on the outside were little, and then one was bigger in the middle. And then they walked towards me. And the 2 outriders were the 2 ETs that had taken me. And how do I recognise them? Because the buggers all look the same. But you do. You do recognise them. So on some energetic level, you are recognising them. You can determine if they're male or female, if their energy is such. But standing in the middle of the 2 was my drunken friend, Paul, from earlier on that evening. Clearly worse for wear, still. Swaying, and they seemed very apprehensive of him. So I jumped up. I moved over to him, Paul, and as I did, the greys sort of stepped back. And I took Paul in my arms and pulled him down onto me, and I just said, "It's okay, man, I'll take care of you now." Because this guy was really drunk. When you're 16 and you're really drunk, your world's in a spin. When you're 16, you're really drunk and you've just been abducted by aliens, wow. So I just held him close, and he was whimpering, and he smelled sick, and the whole 16-year-old I've just drunk too much deal. I held him. In some contact experiences, there are jumps. That things aren't linear. You're here, and then jump, you're somewhere else. And that's what happened. I was there in this little corridor with 2 greys holding Paul, and the next thing, I was in a very human-looking environment. It was a bedroom of sorts. I instinctively knew I was in Paul's bedroom. I just knew it. So what I did next was what I'd done with other friends in that sort of state. I pulled the bed covers back, got Paul onto the bed, lifted him up, turned him on his side, because this boy's drunk. I looked for a waste paper basket, put it next to the side of the bed so he's got something to be sick in. I make sure he's breathing. The boy starts snoring very quickly. The greys are behind me, and they're observing all this. And then it's jump. Jump again. And the next jump takes me into the room that I woke up into the next morning. This basement. And there was this bed, there was this like makeshift bed, and I got in it and I went to sleep. Now, why do you think, why did that happen? Why did they take us from separate locations, take us onto the craft, and then take us back to one location? Could it be that the greys that had abducted us, that had taken us that night, they'd never had a drunk one before? They said, "Oh my God, it's a drunk one, what are we going to do? If our supervisor finds out we've taken a drunk one, we're going to lose our jobs." So this other one is showing him love and care. That is love and care. We recognise it. We don't recognise it because they don't know what love and care. But they see me taking control of the situation. So I assume that they say, "Let's drop them back off at one location." So I believe that what happened that night was a rarity. That these little programmed ETs dealt with the curved ball. That they went beyond their programming. and thought for themselves. I remember going out for a drink with Paul and the other ones afterwards when my memory had come back, and I remember trying to bring this up with Paul, and I just remember him staring me down as if to say, don't go there. So I often wonder, is there a middle-aged man out there that goes to sleep every night and he remembers a very cold night back in January 1973 and about this really strange experience he had one night when he was really drunk. And Steve Jones was there, wasn't he? I dreamt about him, and there were like these, I don't know, these munchkins from Wizard of Oz there. Or maybe he's like me. Maybe he remembers everything now. Maybe his contact experience continued. I don't know. That's the main experience I'm going to talk about. I'm going to sort of float over a couple more now. 2003, busy year for me. Wow, the contact experiences started with the light beings, and everything, the potency of my contact went out of the window. The contact was happening on a weekly basis. Don't go, please. I never liked him anyway. 2003, strangely enough, I suffer with insomnia. I don't sleep well, surprisingly enough. So this particular night, Annie went to bed. I wasn't ready to go to sleep. Reese, my son, was staying with his mum, so I went into his bedroom to read. And I kept feeling a sense that I needed to go downstairs. I went downstairs, looked into the lounge and the dining room, and at the end was the big glass patio doors in the garden. And it was fully lit outside, and I thought, oh, I've left the light on. And then I see movement on the patio, and I look, and once again, you know, I'm an ET contact experiencer. I know what these things predict. So I look out, oh, thank God, there isn't any greys on the patio, but what there is are 3 foxes. They're about 4 feet tall, standing on their hind legs, walking up and down my patio. I think, oh, thank God for that. It's not the greys, you know, it's just 3 4-foot foxes walking about. Whew. Thank goodness for that. And then these 3 foxes walk through the glass window, and as they walk through the glass window, they become greys. I'm taken. What happened there is not relevant. What is relevant, when they brought me back, they didn't put me in the house. They left me just outside the window on the patio. And it was one of those occasions where, as the craft, which was right above my head, big sort of carrot red, strawberry, bubbling light above my head, and this was about midnight. Where are your neighbours? Where are your curtain twitching neighbours? I just think that these craft aren't visible to everybody. When this craft took off, it took my memory of what just happened with it. So within seconds, I'm standing there thinking, where am I? What am I doing here? And the little voice says, oh, it's okay, you're sleepwalking. So I try the back door, it's locked, go around the front door, it's closed. I think, that's okay, I pulled it too. So I have to throw stones at the window. Annie comes down eventually. As she goes to open the door, I hear her unlocking it from the inside, taking the chain off. And all of a sudden, the protection drops, and I think, you know exactly what's just happened here. You may not be able to remember this second. But when Annie opened the door, she said, what are you doing? I said, I don't know. And as I stepped in, I just said, everything's okay, let's go to bed. And you hear experiencers do this. They turn off. They show no need or want to explore. So the next morning, Annie and I talked it through. My memory came back completely, what had happened, and we discussed what it actually meant. Now, I believe that up until 2003, my wife supported me 99% with regards to my ET contact. That she loved me, she cared for me, But if you maybe opened up a drawer in our house, at the back of the drawer, there was the completed form to get me hospitalised. There probably was, maybe not. But there must have been a tiny little thing in the back of her brain that said, my husband has mental health problems. But after that night, after I walked in the door that night, after the contact, she had the awareness to go round the house, checking all the doors and windows. Every single door and window in the house was locked. There was no way I could have got out. So from that night on, Annie signed up to the program. That she became my total support. That she knew, without doubt, that I was having contact. One relevant incident, and I think it happened around the same time of 2003, because this was my breakthrough year. I had contact with the Greys, and I also stopped being scared. I stopped being fearful or apprehensive or whatever it was. In 2003, I returned to the mindset of that 5-year-old boy. And why it happened, I don't know. If it was a build-up of emotional, spiritual energy, I don't know. But on what I was taken from the house, and I was lying on like a medical gurney aboard a craft. And more often than not, when you're in that situation, you can't move initially, that you're frozen. It's this thing, it's this protection thing. They're scared of us. They are scared of us that we might hit out. So we're frozen. And I lay there and I realised I wasn't frozen. And I could move. And I turned my head and there was about 8 of these little greys whizzing around the room. It was like a ballet. They were going up, doing something, moving over, none of them bumping into each other. I was mesmerised by it. And I lay there, and an awareness came to me that I no longer had to be scared. That at that moment, I reconnected with that 5-year-old boy. I reconnected with the wonder that is ET contact. So I propped myself up on the bed and went, hiya! And every single one of them in the room froze in movement and turned their head. Because this was the big curved ball. This was the moment where they did not know how to do it. And to cut this one short, the witch, my guardian, my teacher, came through one of the openings in the room, came up to me, and she came up to my face and she said, I heard her say, what has happened to you? What has changed since last we met? And I just laughed. I remember laughing out loud and said, I'm not scared anymore. And they don't show expression, but you can sense what they're feeling. And there was a sense of wonder, of excitement that went around that room. And sadly, that because of what happened on that event, they decided to upgrade an implant that I had. So I was returned home with a bloody nose that night. Because they went up my right nostril, cracked the bone at the back, took out an implant that was there and replaced it with I was upgraded. You know, I had big silver wheels that night and so that was really important for me. Right, I'm going to have to rush now. 2 years ago, I was working for a company that distributed organic fruit and veg, and I was their delivery driver. And it was a temporary job, let's say. I did it for a little while because that's what I wanted to do. And I was out in the county of Cambridge, and I was driving through the countryside, and I was so taken by the beauty of what I saw, I pulled the truck over. You can see I've been in America for 4 months. I pulled the van over just to look at the scenery, because it was just beautiful countryside. And it was like I was watching a big TV screen through the windscreen of the van. And as I looked, there was a flash of light. And I blinked, and as I looked again, the picture changed. It was still the same scenery, but it was like I was looking at a HD picture, that it'd gone to high definition, that all the colours were brighter, that everything was crisper and sharper. And then I heard, "Can you see us now?" I thought it was the sat-nav. I expected it then to say, "Turn left in 200 yards." Now, when I have my ET contact, it happens inside. You know, Brigitte was saying about when she was taken out of the car, it was like every fibre of her being, every molecule. And that's how I hear and understand when they communicate with me. Every molecule of my being hears it within. But this I was hearing externally. The voice was inside the cab of the van. And as I went, there was another flash of light and the scene returned to normal. Now, a week later, I was driving in inner London. No longer the beautiful scenery, it was the concrete jungle. And I had a delivery I had 2 deliveries left to do. The last delivery in town, so I got out of the van. As I got out of the van, there was a very familiar sound. It was the chomp, chomp, chomp of a helicopter. And I turned round and looked, and there was a helicopter. You don't see helicopters low down in central London. This was probably 20, 30 feet above the houses. It doesn't happen. Surprisingly enough, this helicopter was black, it had no markings, and it had blacked out windows. And it was a funny, it didn't sound like a normal helicopter, it was a funny sound to it. And I look about and nobody else seems to be aware of it. So as I'm looking, it's got its side to me, and it turns face on, it tilts, and it looks down at me, and it just looks like a big, menacing black shark. Now, when we've had helicopters over the house at home, Annie waves at them, which seems to defuse the situation, because more often than not, they fly away. So I thought, right, do what Annie does and wave. So I went, and it straightened up, turned, and moved away. Now, I rang Annie, but the line was busy, so I sent a text saying, "Black helicopter following me," which probably wasn't the most caring of texts to send. So my last delivery's out in the country. Annie rings and says, "You know, what's going on?" I said, "Everything's fine." Now, the reason, I was apprehensive about how she would respond is because Annie is more trusting of the ETs taking me and returning me home. She's more trusting of them than she is of human agencies having some sort of detrimental impact to my life. Now, I had one delivery left to do in this country lane. You could see up and down the lane for miles, the open fields. I get out of the van and I'm still looking for the helicopters. So I walk round the back of the van going like this. And as I get to the back of the van, I walk into something. Now, there are certain occasions in your life when little alarm bells should go off to say, this is not right. There is high strangeness going on here. But it didn't happen. Because as I bumped into this thing, I looked up and it was a woman. She must have been over 7 feet tall. She was not only large in height, but large in stature. Big red hair. Amazonian. She said to me, "Still looking for the helicopters?" And I went, yeah. Alarm bell? No. I remember the moment just so well. So I stood there. And then she said, she needs to know that they will never be allowed to harm you. And I knew straight away what she meant. I knew she was saying, Annie needs to know that the helicopters will never be allowed to harm you. I went, okay. And then this Amazonian woman leant forward and with 3 fingers pressed me on the forehead. And as she pressed, it was just enough pressure to make me step back like that. And then she said, "Can you see us now? You can see us now." And I realised it was the same voice that was in the cab the week before. It was the same voice. And then she said, "It's time to wake up." And just recently I heard of a Buddhist ceremony where a teacher with a student will press them on the third eye and say, it's time to wake up. And then jump. Jump. The linear time stopped because the next moment I was in the van pulling onto the M25 at 70 miles an hour, and then all the alarm bells went off. All the alarm bells said, what just happened? I'm rushing now because there's something very important I need to speak about, and I've got 15 minutes. There's so much more, and if you bless me by buying my book, the rest of my contact is in my book, but I would ask you to do me a big favour. Once you finish reading my book, pass it on. Don't put it on the shelf with the rest of your books. Please pass it on. I don't care if other people don't buy the book. I want as many people to read this book and read the message inside. So please consider, just consider it, an act of love and care and responsibility of passing something on. Okay, what do I think this all means? Okay. I don't believe that ET contact is about ETs. It never has been. ET contact is about human beings. ET contact is a trigger to wake us up. This awakening of our consciousness has been predicted in ancient civilizations for thousands of years. It's what 2012 is all about. It's about our awakening. And all the ETs have been doing in their contact is holding up a mirror in front of us and saying, are you happy with what you see, or would you like to make some changes, because you do have free will. You know, I opened this evening about saying this fantastic thing of free will, and I don't believe life on other planets necessarily has free will. I believe it might be quite unique to this planet. In 1986, the American Air Force carried out an experiment to prove something very, very important, something that people have been trying to prove for a long, long time, to prove something called prana, something called the morphic resonance, something called the energy grid, the all-connecting energy that connects everything in existence. Chi energy, the life force of the universe. People have been trying to prove it for a long, long time. And in 1986, the American Air Force carried out an experiment to prove it. They published the results of their experiment in Nature magazine. In edition number 432, August 1986, proved beyond any doubt that there is an energy field that connects everything in existence. So why don't we all know about it? When I was at the Monroe Institute back in June, I met somebody who was part of the program. There's life moving the chess pieces about. And I said to him, why did they publish the results? Because normally they come up with something like that, they squash it. They don't let it go any further. And he said, because of the billions that was spent on this project, we had to prove where the money had gone. But we knew that it wouldn't go any further. So with accepting that there is proof that this energy field exists, it explains prayer, how prayer works. It explains anything to do with projecting the mind, with projecting your intent, remote viewing, telepathy, It explains how it works. If the individual has the ability to project their intent, to send out communication, this is how it works. That this energy field exists. The fact about this energy field was in the Bible up until about 1300 years ago. And when common man started to read the Bible, instead of allowing the priest to read the Bible and edit out, I think it was Constantine, wasn't it? He did this big editing job on the Bible, and there were things in it that they needed to take out because it explained how prayer actually worked, that you didn't need to go through the middleman, that you could do it. So they took that out. They also took out the fact that reincarnation is real. It was in the Bible. They took that out. So this energy field exists. There is something happening. This is one of those duh moments for you. Something is happening to the human race. It started, as far as I know, in the late 80s and will culminate over the next few years. An awakening. Human beings, after being asleep for thousands of years, are starting to wake up. We are starting to experience new emotions, new feelings, new abilities. It's what 2012 is all about. Now, how can we actively tune in to this energy field and change the world we live in? As I said, one of the things that I'm able to do is to take complicated information and make it simpler. DNA. I didn't know what DNA was. I had no reason to know what DNA was. And then I find out this. 10%, I beg your pardon, 10% of our DNA is there to create the proteins that make us. I said this recently at Harvard to all the professors and everything, expecting them to say, no, I don't think so. And they didn't. They said, yeah, that's right. 10% of our DNA creates the proteins that make us. The other 90% has no apparent purpose. It has been labelled by the surprisingly honest scientific community as junk DNA. I like to call it sleeping DNA. It is a computer program for this hardware. It is there. It was put there. This 90% of our DNA that apparently has no purpose is the fingerprints of our maker. It was put there to say, we were here. So if you need proof of ET existence, we only do have to look in the mirror. It was put in there as a program to be activated at some point in the future. That is why we are all experiencing the things we are experiencing now. But can we speed the game up? Can we get ahead of the game? Yes, we can. We can use a very, very simple application. And it's nothing new. It's the sort of thing that certain people have been telling us about throughout the ages. It's the sort of thing that Jesus would have said. It's the sort of thing that John Lennon said when he said all you need is love. We can make a fundamental change to our physical, our spiritual, our mental by making some very simple alterations to our day-to-day behaviour. And in doing so, we will send an energy out into this morphic resonance that will connect with other like minds and will activate this sleeping DNA. And the actions I'm talking about are the most simplest thing in the world. I am unrecognisable to the man I was 5 years ago. And then 5 years ago, when I had contact with the light beings, and they showed me this, and I started doing it, my life changed. My psychic abilities changed. My ability to love and care and show responsibility for my words and actions changed. It ain't easy. Every single day I trip up. But then again, I've had 50 years of being an arse. So I'm not going to become a spiritually enlightened being on a focused level every minute of the day. But the way I started was I started to take 60 minutes out of my day to become aware of what I said and what I did during that 60 minutes and look at the impact my words and actions had on other people and how their response was to me. You're going to probably be underimpressed by this because it is so simple. So I thought, how can I do it? So I started opening doors for people, opening a door for somebody. And when they said thank you, I made eye contact and smiled back. And I experienced that energy, that moment. When my child came home from school and said, Daddy, I need a minute, I just had a hard day at work, but I gave him a minute. And it changed everything for him. And it changed our relationship. And his response to my reaction sent energy out. When my wife came to me and said, I've had a really tough day, can we just talk? Well, she didn't want to talk, she just wanted me to listen. So I did it. When I was at work, in a situation, in an interaction with a work colleague, I showed consideration. I showed responsibility for my words and actions. Just because I was the boss, I didn't respond on that basis. I responded by being a loving, caring human being. And I started by doing that 60 minutes every day. And you probably think, yeah, that's how I live my life. Well, all power to you if that is the case. But why don't you take this forward and help it with somebody else maybe? Or maybe play my little game and tomorrow take out 60 minutes and be focused on your intent, on your words and actions for 60 minutes and see if you can really, really do it without getting aggravated or upset or showing some sort of upset. Because it's not a matter of changing our life, it's a matter of taking out one way of doing it and replacing it with another. It is the hardest thing to do, but it will change your life. And I'm not up here to preach, I'm up here to show you a little magic trick. Because this little magic trick has changed my life. And throughout my talks in America, I've had people that have come up to me and who have already read my book and they've started applying this in their life, and they say, my life, Steve, what is all this about? And my redneck husband read your book and I don't know who he is anymore because he cooked my tea last night. He mowed the lawn at the weekend and it's really freaking me out. This is an organic happening. This awakening of our sleeping DNA will happen for most of us, although some of us are quite happy to continue on in this dense, three-dimensional material world. Because what's happening to us is we are waking up. We will stop being sheeple. We will wake up and we will say we ain't going to take the crap anymore. There is a human revolution going on. A human revolution. It is starting in small pockets around the world. And very soon you will see major waves of this revolution starting in places like America and Britain. And we will take to the streets and we will start doing things differently. And they are scared out their bloody life, whoever they may be. Signs of their fear are reflected in 9/11. The fear is reflected in the way that they are crashing our economic climate. But things are changing. It is no coincidence what is happening to Rupert Murdoch at the moment. What is happening to him is a reflection of our awakening. We may not bring him down, but things will be different in the future because of what's happening. And we as a community, we have all incarnated at this moment in time to be a part of all this. Some people say that we live in the boondocks, that we live out on the edge of the Milky Way, that we're not that important. Well, I've already told you that we are. The diversity of life on this planet is so special and so unique. We've been building to this moment for a long time. We have arrived at this moment 5 times, or is it 4 times in the past. This evolutionary jump has been presented to us on many occasions. The last time this was presented to us as an option was 12,000 years ago. But very sadly, a small group of scientists in a place called Atlantis started playing with matches, and they messed it all up for all of us, and they brought the house of cards all down. We are now being given that opportunity again, but there is a force at work to stop it from happening, because through this evolution of consciousness, through this jump of evolution, we will never be the same again, and we will never be told what to do or controlled. And there are people that don't want that to happen. But it's not written in stone. So it's up to you, it's up to me, and the ETs are playing a part in it. Yeah, there probably are some ETs that aren't nice, and there are some ETs that are nice. You know, life is a box of chocolates. And it's the same with human beings. We're all different, but we should not apply our anthropomorphic understanding of what intelligence is on the ETs, because the way that we behave is probably not that consistent outside with the ETs. As I say, there probably are ETs that have a different agenda, but on the whole, I believe that our ET contact is a good thing. It is there to, as Rudy Shields said from Harvard, to crack open our brains. So we've been issued with an invitation. Hence the name of my book, An Invitation to the Dance. The ETs told me that that was the name of the book before I even started to write it, because they said that's what it's all about. You have been issued with an invitation to the dance. So it is time that we got on our dancing shoes and took to the floor.